Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where late in the day on Wednesday, when they announced that Gareth Evans is in talks to potentially direct a Deathstroke standalone movie, I didn't exactly mince words on Twitter with my reaction. I tweeted, again, honestly, my first thought, re a Deathstroke movie? Cast someone else besides Joe Manganiello. News ain't even trending, and they already have hashtag Momoa, who, it was revealed, is one of the two things people are the most excited about when it comes to Justice League, along with Gal Gadot. And so, with Jason Momoa really trying to change how Aquaman is portrayed, I think it doesn't help anybody to have Joe Manganiello basically come in and do the exact same thing. Neither actor has a lot of range, and they happen to be very similar. Maybe that's why Zack Snyder cast both of them. Maybe that's the kind of dude he gets along with or admires, right? Who knows? But I think it is a mistake. And so I wanted to take the opportunity today on Morning Movie News to further explain, add some context to my feelings about the film. Because after I tweeted that, I promptly got into a little bit of an argument with some of you who are very excited about this movie. I don't know why, but let me explain where I'm coming from, and you can further explain your position down in the comments below. All right, so yes, I am very happy that someone in Hollywood finally recognized Gareth Evans' immense talent as not only a director, but a fight director. He doesn't do his own, he does some fight choreography, but, we'll talk about his fight choreographer in just a moment. But, he directs the movie as a whole. I mean, if you haven't seen The Raid and The Raid 2, you should fix that as soon as possible, particularly The Raid 2. The Raid 2 is as good as any Hollywood movie. It's really spectacular. And, those movies come from Indonesia. They have Indonesian talent. Gareth Evans is not from Indonesia. I believe he's from the UK. And he had to go to Indonesia to get work. And, it's worked out so-so for him. He's only coming over to Hollywood now, and the Raid movies have been out for a couple of years now. Now, J.J. Abrams recognized them by giving a cameo to Iko Uwais and Yayan Ryun, who's the fight choreographer on the movies, as well as an actor on screen, in The Force Awakens. But it was a horrible cameo. It was kind of embarrassing, actually, and I don't think particularly respectful of their ability. They had no lines, they really had no fighting, and they had ridiculous hairstyles to the point where I can't believe they weren't like, yeah, I'm not. I guess it was Star Wars, but I don't know. It's like, careful what you wish for, right? So I would hope, and also one of you tweeted, after I tweeted out my thing about Deathstroke, that maybe perhaps these gentlemen in particular, Iko Uwais and Yayan Ryan would find themselves in the Deathstroke movie. And then I was like, well, then okay, let's make it so that they can get ahead too. Now, the reason I think they're considering Gareth Evans is because of Deathstroke, one of his hallmarks being his amazing fight sequences. And one of the things he's most well known for is going mano-a-mano with Batman in a Tim Miller directed video game short. Tim Miller, of course, very famous for doing the DC Universe Online trailer. Then, of course, he jumped over to Deadpool, which was a huge success. And he's doing the upcoming Terminator movie. And it's, to some degree, you're like, well, why wouldn't Tim Miller direct a Deathstroke movie? But, he's already booked. Now, another thing that came up in our comments on Twitter is, if Deadpool is so successful, that's probably why they want a Deathstroke movie, right? I think it's the same reason they want a Venom movie, which they seem to be turning into at least having some comedic elements to it because Ruben Fleischer is directing. And Tom Hardy can be quite funny. But the problem with Deadpool and Deathstroke is that they're very similar. That's not an accident, because Deadpool actually is a copycat. Well, he's an homage. He's like a comedic version of Deathstroke. He was created afterwards as a response to that character, skewering it. But as we've discussed before, whatever the mainstream audience sees first is what they consider to be the original. It's the same thing, like, remember when John Carter of Mars came out and people were like, oh, you like Star Wars? You like Superman? Well, it's all thanks to John Carter. And it's like, John Carter's the original. And it's like, nobody cares, because they don't, that doesn't, to them, that's not the original. So they see John Carter and they go, that's awfully derivative. And I know it's annoying and it's not fair, but, life's not fair, right? So I think that a lot of people would look at a Deathstroke movie and go, oh, so it's Deadpool without the jokes, huh? Why would I want that? Although we'll see if Deadpool goes too far in the sequel. But as I said with the first Deadpool movie, some of my favorite elements of that film were the stabby and the jumpy. I wanted more action. And so if they just go overdrive in terms of the action, you know, some people are saying it would be like a John Wick, more action than John Wick, just wall-to-wall fight scenes, then I could maybe see a selling point here. But the reality is, if you're not going to use this movie to introduce the Teen Titans, as some of you also tweeted, why would you give Deathstroke his own movie? He hasn't even appeared in the DCEU yet. There's that little video that Ben Affleck tweeted out, and it was cool. It got a lot of attention, but I don't think that Deathstroke really deserves his own movie. I mean, he's a cool character that comes in and has a great fight sequence in someone else's movie, and then he goes away. Or he's fighting the Teen Titans, his main enemies. You know, he had apparently a very good storyline, I think, on Arrow, you guys have been telling me, with Manu Bennett, who I think is a fabulous actor. I really like him a lot, actually. I saw him in the Shannara Chronicles. You know, I lost interest in that. It took too long to move forward. But I thought he was the best takeaway from that. So, you know, Deathstroke does have some fans. And maybe that's why they're deciding maybe to give him his own movie. But, you know, I don't really think that the audience that enjoys him on the CW is big enough to demand a movie, especially if it's going to interrupt, which should be carefully laid plans for the DCEU. But now it just seems like throwing whatever you can against a wall and seeing what sticks. Also, I just really feel that Joe Manganiello is a mistake. I think that he's not only too much like Momoa, but I think that he's not particularly professional. I think that the way he handled himself with the Batman movie, you know, talking too much. I mean, I'm glad he's excited to be in it, but, you know, he would talk about shooting dates, etc., and he would almost act like it was like his movie to some degree. And it's like, whoa, it's not your movie, Joe Manganiello. You know, like, he shouldn't feel like he has tremendous ownership over it. I'd be like, you know, once your character does finally appear on screen, and if that character becomes ridiculously popular, then you can start doing that. But I feel like Joe Manganiello was just, you know, skipping a couple of steps in the humble department, and I think that it was not great. And again, I don't think he's a particularly good actor, and I think the only thing he really brings to the role is that he has strong facial features, so he kind of could look like Deathstroke if he dyes his hair white and he grows a goatee, and he's very tall. I mean, Snyder has done some wonderful casting, but, you know, you can't get every casting choice perfect, and I think that this really, honestly, is a mistake. And again, you can't have more than one character with this bro attitude that they've given to Aquaman. I think it would just be ridiculous. A lot of you don't know Joe Manganiello. It's become apparent to me from your tweets, and you're just going off of still photos of him. Watch clips of him online in Magic Mike, and watch clips of him online from True Blood, and you will see that he's a very light actor. He's really not going to be able to deliver, I think, what's needed here. Now, if the film's super cheap, maybe they go ahead and make it. If it's going to have amazing Gareth Evans level fight action sequences like The Raid, particularly The Raid 2, and it brings in Iko Uwais and Yahya Rian, okay, and, you know, speaking of Indonesia, why don't you bring in Lady Shiva? You know, she's not usually from that region specifically, but, you know, you can alter it a little bit. That would be really awesome. Maybe have Cassandra Cain, you know, also an Asian character, you know, a Batgirl, a trained assassin, fabulous character. And then also, if they want to maybe bring in Wade Wilson, you know, aka Deathstroke's daughter Rose, I might be someone interested in that, who he also trained. A lot of bad parenting going on over there in the DC fighter universe with Cassandra Cain and Rose Wilson. But, you know, if you just bring in all of DC's really hardcore fighters, you know, Black Canary also would fit into that group. That could maybe work. Just have, like, this amazing fight movie, right? And have, like, really great fight sequences by Gareth Evans, and maybe spend about, I don't know. With Gareth Evans, I think if I gave him like $60 to $70 million, he'd feel he won the lottery. He'd just go crazy because, you know, he makes his films for much cheaper, and he does a great job. So that, I could see that maybe working, but it still seems to be pulling focus away from having the DCEU have a strong direction. So that's my clarified thoughts on the Deathstroke movie. All right, so for the next story of the day, let's go in a totally different direction and talk about Anna Kendrick, the first look at her as Noelle, daughter of Santa, who has to take over for Pops after he retires and her brother gets cold feet assuming the mantle. I think that'd be interesting. It always bothers me whenever I watch, you know, historical films and they're like skipping the daughter, going to the son to inherit. Even with businesses, I get very frustrated. I'm like, maybe your daughter is interested in your line of work. For instance, I always get upset that Walt Disney has two daughters and did absolutely nothing to train either one of them to take over his empire. He just gave it to his son-in-law, who was a football player, and ran the company into the ground. It was so annoying. All right, so anyway, I think Anna Kendrick looks fabulous. It reminds me actually of Paul Dini's Jingle Bell, which is more cheesecakey, and Anna Kendrick, of course, her big appeal is to women. And I like the cold beer sign in the photo as well. I think it shows a little edgier story, maybe. Not too edgy, it's still Disney. And, you know, people are referencing the Santa Claus, which was a very successful Disney Christmas franchise with Tim Allen, although only the first movie was good. Very good, but then it got horrible. But this actually reminds me quite a bit of Fred Claus, which also focused on the Claus family, which starred Vince Vaughn, Paul Giamatti as Santa. He was an amazing Santa, and Kevin Spacey and Elizabeth Banks. Actually, it's just I think John Michael Higgins, you know, the guy who does the commentary with Elizabeth Banks in Pitch Perfect, he's in the movie as well. It's an absolutely fabulous movie. I love Fred Claus because it explores the ramifications of labeling kids as naughty, right? It didn't do very well in theaters, but it's really, I think, one of my favorite Christmas movies. I think it's so fabulous and it doesn't get the attention it deserves. And so maybe I'm a little partial to what they're doing here because this reminds me of that. Even down to the casting. Shirley MacLaine will be Noelle's elf nanny. Bill Hader is in the film, as is Billy Eichner from Billy on the Street. He's actually turning into a pretty decent actor, though. I don't know if you've watched Friends from College. He has a small role on there, and that's the first I've seen him acting. I know he's on American Horror Story right now, and he's getting good reviews there as well. But I was like, oh, you're a pretty darn good serious actor, Billy Eichner. And we all know he's funny, so I think he's a good addition. So this looks very good to me, and they're filming now, just started filming, but it doesn't come out until November 8th, 2019. That's ridiculous. While Disney has so many movies in the pipeline, you got to get in line, because next holiday season is already reserved. And in November, well, in addition to the Wreck-It Ralph 2 that they're releasing for Thanksgiving, Disney, wow, they really block in the dates. So they have 3 holiday movies, actually. But anyway, in terms of live-action holiday movies in 2018, November will kick off with the Nutcracker and the Four Realms. And then, of course, for the Christmas Day, Mary Poppins Returns hits theaters. So there's no room for poor Noelle in 2018. So she's going to sit in the can, or I guess as an elf, sit on the shelf, until November 8th, 2019. That's nuts. I don't even know maybe if she should have released a first look so early, considering the film is so far away. Maybe, actually, come to think of it, I would have advised against it, because you gotta wait 2 years to see this thing. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is that Adam Driver is finally getting some more work. You know, he was so hot off of Girls. You know, he was the character that everybody gravitated towards. And so he had a wealth of opportunity in front of him. And it's, interestingly enough, you know, he's in Star Wars. He's Kylo Ren. But I think because he was stuck under a mask for most of the first movie, you know, it hasn't been that great for him. And he's been so busy making Star Wars movies, he hasn't been able to do much else. I thought he was fabulous in Logan Lucky. I thought he was really, really good. But his career hasn't quite taken off the way one would expect, considering, again, how much heat he had coming off of Girls. But he has landed another role, thank goodness, and it's Spike Lee's new joint, which will be produced by Jordan Peele. So it's interesting. Spike Lee's trying, you know, there's such amazing things happening behind the camera with directors of color. I think Spike Lee is like, how am I not a part of this conversation? You know, it's like, well, Spike Lee, I think, became very, you know, interested in other things, you know, a little bit more than filmmaking, and I think he hasn't evolved to match the times. And then also, you know, to his credit, he wanted to just make some mainstream films that had absolutely nothing to do with, you know, black talent, the black experience, and the films were medium. So he didn't become this huge mainstream director either. So he kind of like got stuck. So he's making this new movie called Black Klansman, and it is about an undercover detective who infiltrates the Klan and works his way all the way to the top. And it's a true story. But what makes it amazing is this was a black undercover detective who got the Klan to take him in and have him be a part of their organization. That's a very interesting, compelling story. And so John David Washington is the star, who you know from Ballers, Dwayne Johnson's HBO show, but of course is also Denzel Washington's son. I've seen him on a couple episodes of Ballers. I don't like Ballers. I tried it because, you know, it's a new show. It was The Rock, and I was like, not for me. It's basically Entourage with sports. And I don't think that John David Washington, from what I've seen, has his father's charisma, but hopefully Spike Lee in this movie can change my mind. But he will play the detective, the star, and then Adam Driver will play another undercover detective at the police department in Colorado. And they specify in the rundown of the movie that Adam Driver's detective is Jewish and basically is the Sheldon of the force, right? He's very talented, but he's antisocial and he critiques other people, but he's a great guy. And I guess maybe John David Washington and Adam Driver's characters find themselves, in that time period as the black detective and the Jewish detective, they have to band together because they're the outsiders on the force, et cetera, et cetera. I hope that Spike Lee can do a very good job with this. I think he's assembling, I'm not a big John David Washington fan, but I think Adam Driver is very talented. And, I think just the fact that it is Denzel Washington's son will get a lot of media coverage. And then Jordan Peele producing is a big deal. And so I hope this works out for Adam Driver. I hope it's a good role. I mean, he was also in Midnight Special. He had a small role there. But really, maybe now that he's ditched the helmet for the second Star Wars movie that he's going to be in, things will work a little bit better for him. And he's still in one of the best Star Wars SNL sketches of all time, Kylo Ren, Undercover Boss. It's so good. You can still watch it now. It doesn't get any less funny over time. All right, so the viewer question, this is an interesting one, particularly because we just talked about transgender actors the other day and their chances in Hollywood. Well, Ryan Murphy has done a lot to try and move the opportunities forward for transgender actors, and that's the question from D-Man. So D-Man says, hello, Grace. D-Man 4. Hello, Grace. I have a question for you today, and I would love to hear your opinion on it. I just saw that Ryan Murphy will be making a show called Pose, which will be including a groundbreaking number of transsexual actors and actresses in it. Do you think it could in any way influence the movie industry and have them take more risks with trans talent? Love your videos so much. Keep up the amazing content. Smiley face. Well, yes, Ryan Murphy is making a show for FX that takes place in the 1980s. And what it's going to do is it's going to focus on the different cultural elements that came about during that era and how you can see they play into today. That was one of the more interesting, well, there are tons of interesting elements about American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson. But one of the elements that really worked was seeing how that moment in history and cultural history helped shape a lot of the things that are like around today, from the Kardashians, etc. It's really an interesting element of that show. So that's what this show is. This is what this new Pose show is going to be totally about. And it does have a number of named talent attached. They just added Tatiana Maslany, James Vanderbeek, Kate Mara, and Evan Peters, who's a Ryan Murphy staple. They'll all be in the show. But Ryan Murphy has also cast 5 transgender actors in the show. And, Ryan Murphy himself, being a member of the LGBT community, I think felt this was obviously important to him. He's also a very savvy businessman, so he wants to get the attention, for his show that this will, of course, get it. And if he can do a good thing at the same time, fabulous, right? So as to your question, D-Man, as to whether or not this will change how Hollywood feels, well, Hollywood likes to make money, right? Hollywood is risk averse. So Ryan Murphy can take a risk because he has so much success at this point. And also, he's making so many shows at once. He can afford for one to be more of a risk taker than some of the other ones, say, right? Although his Gianni Versace upcoming American Crime Story also focuses, of course, on a large part of the LGBT community because Gianni Versace and his lover and his killer were all members of the LGBT community. So the thing here is the only way I can see this working is twofold. If the show's a big hit and everyone's talking about it, then Hollywood will say, oh, there's an audience for this. Let's do more. And then also if one of the actors or more than one of the actors is a fan favorite. If one of the actors, it becomes very popular, very charismatic, and everyone starts talking about them, like, kind of like Millie Bobby Brown on Stranger Things. And they're like, I love, see how all the people on Stranger Things, particularly Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour have gone on to get other work. Interestingly enough, some other actors have not. Where's Winona Ryder's follow-up gig? She ain't got one. But, if one of these actors or two of them click, then they could find themselves getting other work, right? Because it's no longer should we cast a transgender actor in this role, but hey, we have a good supporting role here. I think it would be supporting in a mainstream project. Why not cast this transgender actor that everybody likes right now, right? It'll give our project more heat. That's the way Hollywood works. But they have to be popular, like Sense8, and it's interesting. I'm curious to see to what degree it has to be popular. Sense8 had a very strong fan base that got very upset when the show was canceled, but obviously not enough people were into Sense8 to keep it on Netflix. So nobody from Sense8 has really gotten any work. I mean, I'm sure that they're working actors. I'm sure they'll show up other places, but Sense8 hasn't propelled anyone's career forward. No one's like, get me that actor from Sense8. And I think that might be part of the problem because of the part of the problem there might be the Wachowskis, who aren't particularly business savvy and actually are very business averse. And so I think that doesn't help the actors that they cast, unfortunately. But Ryan Murphy's very, very business savvy. He's very political. He's very plugged into Hollywood. So he will push his actors himself and on other people. So I think anyone that Ryan Murphy hires is in a little bit of a better position. For instance, Sarah Paulson's a good example of that. He has used her again and again and again. And it took a long time, despite how good her work is, for her to cross over. Now she's going to be in Ocean's 8, the all-female Ocean's 11 movie, and then also in Glass, the Unbreakable sequel opposite Bruce Willis, Samuel L. Jackson, and James McAvoy. And she, by the way, also is a member of the LGBT community. But I mean, her Marsha Clark and O.J. Simpson was transcendent. I think she's, of course, you can no longer deny her talent after that. But she's always been very talented. But so Ryan Murphy was able to get her out there and, now more into the mainstream. And so even if maybe these 5 actors, they don't right away click, I can see Ryan Murphy, because he's such a machine in turning out new shows, maybe he'll notice that one is particularly popular and he'll put them in another one of his shows, and maybe another one and another one, because he does have his little acting troupe. And then they'll get more work. Like, for instance, Evan Peters was Quicksilver, and he was great, but Evan Peters doesn't really get a lot of work, which is weird, because he's so popular. But, nobody really wants to hire him. It's tough out there in Hollywood. So I think this is certainly helpful. I think it's an important step forward. I think Ryan Murphy, I think that's why it's important to have different types of people in positions of power in Hollywood, because they help other people like them. And so I'm glad that Ryan Murphy's doing that. I think he's a very good person to do so, because the Wachowskis, of course, are also a part of that community. But again, they're very business averse, and so they just aren't, I think, able to help people as much as those people need. So that's my answer to your question, D-Man. I'm curious, are you guys going to watch Posed? How does it sound to you? And what do you think might get you to be more interested in watching a transgender actor? How do you feel about it? Write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Write your thoughts about today's top 3 stories, D-Man's viewer question, D-Man 4, anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions, of course, that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.